Hello YouTube and welcome to another route learning video. On today's video we're going to be taking a Scotrail Class 320 from Glasgow Central to Lanark on the West Coast Mainline North add-on, which is a distance of around 29 3/4 miles. On the way we will be calling at Cambuslang, Uddingston, Belshill, Motherwell, Shieldmuir, Wishaw, Carluke and finally Lanark. The Class 320 is very similar to the Class 321, and indeed this comes with the Armstrong Powerhouse Class 321 pack. The Class 320 has been in service since 1990. It was built at Brell, York, and a total of 22 of these trains were built, with 3 coaches per train set. The maximum speed of these trains is 90 miles per hour, and the total weight of the unit is 114.5 tonnes. They operate on the 25 kilovolt AC overhead system. Once in the cab of the Class 320, the first thing that we need to do is go to the rear of the train, and then we need to just turn on the tail lights with the tail light switch there, which I've turned on with the mouse. Now I'm going to jump back to the front of the train, and the first thing I'm going to do here is move the reversing handle to the neutral position, and then I reset the AWS self-test sequence. Now I'm going to leave that into the neutral position until we need to depart, as if I put it into forward, the driver safety device will go off when it doesn't need to. The next thing I'm going to do is turn off the driver reminder appliance. As you can see, the signal ahead is displaying a green aspect. Behind us, I'm going to turn on the saloon lighting so that the passengers have some lights for the journey. I'm also going to open each window which can open in this train. If you watch my previous videos, you'll know that I do prefer to drive with the window open, as you can hear the train better, and you can also hear the noise of the wind rushing past. Next, I'm going to turn on the headlights with the H button, and if you just press that once, that will put it into the day setting. Down here you can see that we have a standard West Code 3-step brake, and over on the right here you can see that we have a 4-step power handle. The last thing that I need to do before we start is set the destination indicator. So you can see over here that Lanark is code 0005. So if I now go over to this side, I'm going to click on C and then press 0005 and then enter, and Lanark is now entered as the destination. At this point we're now almost ready to depart. Now that it's time to depart, I've pressed R to close the doors, and as soon as the doors are closed you should see the door interlock light illuminate, which is just illuminated on the dashboard now. So now we can depart. Departing from Glasgow Central, the starting speed limit is 15 miles per hour, and we've got around 5 miles to go to the next stop, which is Cambuslang. Now that we've reached 15 miles per hour, I've idled the power to allow the train to coast until we can accelerate further. The next speed change will be an increase to 20 miles per hour in about a quarter of a mile's time. When departing from Glasgow Central, you do cross the River Clyde just coming out of the station on the Clyde Viaduct, which is a bridge that's just coming up that we're going to cross. After that we will turn left on a junction, and at that point we can then accelerate up to the 20 mile per hour speed limit. I would just like to say that the first train guide video, which I uploaded the other day, has actually proved to be very popular, and I've had a lot of positive feedback on that, so I am going to be making more of that series, hopefully ultimately covering every train that's available. I'm not sure which train I'm going to cover next, but I'm going to try and get another train guide video up within the next week or so. Now we've just turned left here on the point, we can now accelerate up to the 20 mile per hour speed limit. Once we reach 20 miles per hour, I will then once again idle the power to allow the train to coast until we can accelerate further. The speed limit does go up in steps departing from Glasgow Central, so you start at 15 miles per hour, and then it goes up to 20, then 25, and then 30. And then shortly after the 30 speed limit we can increase up to 75. The down air line is leaving us now on the right hand side. That's actually the route we would take on the Glasgow Airport rail link route towards Glasgow Airport and also Paisley Gilmore Street. As you can see, the speed limit is now going up to 25 miles per hour, and we can accelerate to that shortly after we've finished turning on this light left-hand curve that we're currently on. Because we're doing slightly below the 20 speed limit already, I'm now going to power up for the new 25 mile per hour speed limit. As soon as we reach 25 miles per hour, I'm then going to idle the power, as I am doing now, to allow the train to coast, and you can see the 30 mile per hour speed boards just coming up. The speed limit has now gone up to 30 miles per hour, and we can accelerate just as we're crossing this point here. So I'm now going to increase power to accelerate up to 30, and then once again idle the power to allow the train to coast until we're able to accelerate up to the 75 speed limit. The speed limit will be going up to 75 miles per hour shortly after we've left this left-hand curve here, and then just after that we will be passing Polmadie Intercity Depot, which would now be the home of Virgin Trains, Virgin Voyages and Pendolinos that are stabled and maintained in the Glasgow area. As you can see, the speed limit is now going up to 75 miles per hour. We will be able to accelerate to that just after this overhead gantry that we passed under. So now just before the next one here, I'm going into full power to accelerate up to the 75 speed limit. The next speed change will be up to 80 miles per hour, just 3/4 of a mile from our stop. So just to update you on my plans, after this route learning video I'm planning on doing another one on the South London network, which will be in a Class 465 between London Victoria and Kent House. And then after that I'm going to be looking at doing the Scottish East Coast main line from Dundee to Edinburgh. The Voyagers clearly won the day in the votes because I asked you which train you would prefer to see. So I'll be making the Dundee to Edinburgh video in a Voyager. We're now passing Polmadie Depot, which I mentioned, which is on the left here. You probably saw the Pendolino and Voyager parked outside. As we reach 75 miles per hour, I am going to cut the power now. So I'm going to be in step 2 power and watch what happens to our speed. If we start losing speed, I'll go up to step 3 to ensure that we don't lose too much speed. It seems that at present step 2 power is holding us nicely at 75 miles per hour, so I'm just going to leave it at that. The line now joining from the left is the line from Glasgow Central lower level, And then shortly diverging on the left is the Whifflet line, which we actually covered in the Glasgow Central circular video, which I uploaded a week or two back. So this section between Glasgow Central and where the line turns off towards Whifflet has already been covered in that video. I have just reduced the power to step 1 just because I felt that we were gaining a little bit too much speed there. You can now see the Whifflet line diverging to the left. The speed limit will shortly be going up to 80 miles per hour, however we won't be able to accelerate to that as the 80 board is only 3/4 of a mile from our stop. You can see the 80 board here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to idle the power at this point and just let us lose a little bit of speed. I'm going to brake for our stop on the next AWS ramp and I'm going to make a step 2 brake application. So the AWS ramp is here now. So I've now gone into step 2 of braking to try and bring our speed off, and this should bring it off about right. Unfortunately on this route there are no markers on the platforms to show you where you actually need to stop, so it's all a bit of guesswork. So I'm going to try and estimate where the best place to stop is at Cambuslang. I am temporarily going to increase the braking to step 3 as I don't feel that our speed is coming off quite quick enough, and then I'll reduce to step 2 in a moment. So I'm now down to step 2 and I believe we're slowing down about right, in fact probably slightly too quick now looking at it. I'm aiming to stop next to this overhead gantry just coming up. Departing from Cambuslang, the starting speed limit is 80 miles per hour, and we've got just under 3.5 miles to go to the next stop, which is Uddingston. The speed limit is now going up to 90 miles per hour, which is the maximum speed of this train. And at the 90 mile per hour board we had 2.5 miles to go to the next stop. Just coming up now on the right is Newton Station, which we won't actually go through, and the line from Newton in this direction then heads on to the Hamilton Loop, which leads to Larkhall and also to Motherwell, where you would arrive in the opposite direction to the direction we're going. As you can see, we do now have an approach controlled flashing double yellow signal. This is indicating that we will be turning off the West Coast Main Line just after our next stop. The next signal, which should be a flashing single yellow, may be blank. When I was practicing this journey for the route learning video, unfortunately the signal was blank and wasn't displaying a flashing single yellow aspect. Now at 90 miles per hour I've idled the power and I'm going to make a step 2 brake application just before the AWS ramp there. As you can see, the signal is blank, so you just need to treat it as a flashing single yellow signal if you drive this journey yourself. now see the platform at Uddingston just coming up, and our speed is coming off about right. I have just reduced the braking to step 1 as I felt that we were slowing down just slightly too quick now, and now I've released the brakes, ready to apply just before we enter the platform. I'm aiming to not enter the platform at faster than 25 miles per hour. And I'm aiming to stop at the next overhead gantry with the clock that you can see on the left there. Departing from Uddingston, the starting speed limit is 90 miles per hour, though it's quickly going down to 65 as we cross the junction just ahead and turn off the West Coast Main Line. And we've got around 2.5 miles to go at this point to our next stop, which is Belshill. The speed limit has now gone down to 65 miles per hour, and as you can see we've now turned off the West Coast Main Line, which goes right. We will be rejoining the West Coast Main Line again just before Motherwell. And then after that we will leave the West Coast Main Line again just after Shieldmuir, before rejoining once again. At this point we're now starting to go uphill, as steep as 1 in 79, so as we approach 60 miles per hour, just over, probably 61 or 62, I'm going to reduce the power by 1 step, which should ensure we don't break the speed limit between here and our next stop. I've now reduced the power by 1 step, as we're doing just over 60, and now I'm just going to keep an eye on the speed. In step 3 power we are slowly gaining speed, but if I reduce to step 2 power we will end up losing speed. So I'm going to leave it in step 3 for now, and if we reach 65 and the train wants to go over that, I will then reduce the power by 1 step. You can now see a flashing yellow signal in the distance, which indicates that we will be turning off this line just after our next stop. So just before the AWS ramp for the flashing yellow signal, I'm going to apply the brakes, as that is the braking point for Belshill. I have now idled the power. We are on an uphill gradient, which will help us to slow down. I left braking slightly late there. I did intend to brake just before the AWS ramp, but we should still be okay. As you can see, our speed is coming off quite quick due to the steep uphill gradients. Here at Belshill, I'm aiming to stop just before the footbridge, just coming up now. We are still stopping on an uphill gradient, so when we depart from here we do have to bear in mind that we'll be starting on a 1 in 70 uphill gradient. And so this is about the right stopping point. Notice that I did apply 2 steps of power before the brakes were fully released here. This was just to ensure that we didn't roll back due to the uphill gradient that we're starting on. Departing from Belshill, the starting speed limit is 65 miles per hour, and we've got around 3 miles to go to Motherwell, which is around the halfway point on this journey. The gradient is now levelling out, so we're no longer on an uphill gradient, and you can see that we have a single yellow signal just ahead, which is indicating that we are turning off just after the signal. The signal is a third of a mile away from the next speed change, which is a reduction down to 30 miles per hour. So just as we approach the signal, I'm going to idle the power and then brake for the 30 mile per hour speed limit. So at this point I have now idled the power. And as we pass the signal, I've now made a step 1 brake application, and I'm now going up to step 2. I will reduce that if we do end up slowing down a little bit too quick, but the 30 mile per hour speed limit is just coming up. I have reduced the braking to step 1 momentarily. You can see the point just ahead where the 30 mile per hour speed limit starts, so I'm just fanning the brakes now. I'm now going to brake slightly more, so we're doing a little bit below 30, as just after we turn off here we will start going downhill on a gradient of 1 in 100, which will encourage the train to pick up speed. We're now on the 1 in 100 downhill gradient. This is only a short section, but I'm going to keep an eye on the speed, and if we end up at 30 miles per hour I will apply 1 step of braking to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. I have just temporarily applied a step of braking, and now you can see the gradient is levelling out, so I've released the brakes once again. After rounding this sharp right hand curve, we will then join the line towards Motherwell, and the speed limit will go up to 75 miles per hour. I was just coasting there, but I've now applied 1 step of power as I felt we were just losing a little bit too much speed. Just after this junction where we cross over onto the up line, which we are doing now, we can then accelerate up towards 75 miles per hour in a moment. Just as we reach the rear of the signal on the opposite track, which you can see to our right now, we've just passed that, so I'm now going up to full power to accelerate up towards the 75 speed limit. We now have a double yellow signal coming up. This is indicating that we will be rejoining the West Coast main line in 2 signal sections time. As we pass the signal here, I'm now going to idle the power and allow the train to coast. We will have a warning very shortly for a speed reduction to 15 miles per hour, and I'm going to brake as we pass the Morpeth board, which we're just passing now. I mistakenly went into a full service brake application just then, so I've now reduced the braking to step 2. This should slow us down about right. We're now passing Motherwell depot on the right there. The speed limit falls to 15 miles per hour on this left hand curve that we're about to enter, so I'm just going to keep an eye out to ensure that we don't overspeed entering the 15 zone. In fact, it seems like we might be slowing just a little too quick now, so I've reduced the braking to step 1. You can see the 15 mile per hour speed board just coming up. Now that we're doing 15 miles per hour, I've released the brakes and I'm going to allow the train to coast. The next speed change will be once we've joined the West Coast main line. The speed limit will then be going up to 80 miles per hour, though we won't be able to accelerate to that before we enter the platform at Motherwell. So once the speed limit goes up, I'm going to give us a little bit of power just to accelerate up towards 20, just to help us get in the platform a little bit quicker. So we have now rejoined the West Coast main line. We can accelerate just as we reach the rear of the ground signal on the left, just coming up. So you can see the ground signal now, and just as we pass it, I'm now going to accelerate up to 20 miles per hour. At this point I'm now idling the power to allow the train to coast, and I'm going to gradually brake as we come into the platform. I'm aiming to stop under the first overbridge that you can see coming up just ahead. Departing from Motherwell, the starting speed limit is 80 miles per hour, and we've got around 1 3/4 miles to go to the next stop, which is Shieldmuir. The speed limit has now gone up to 90 miles per hour, and then in a short distance time it will go up to 95. However, we won't be able to get to either speed before we've got to brake for our next stop. Also, you can see we have a flashing yellow signal coming up ahead. I believe it's a flashing double yellow, which indicates that we will be turning off the West Coast main line once again just after the next stop. We have now passed the 95 mile per hour speed board, which is the current speed limit. You can also now see the next signal, which is a flashing single yellow coming up just ahead. The flashing single yellow signal is 2/3 of a mile from the stop at Shieldmuir. So as we pass the next signal, I'm going to idle the power and allow the train to coast. I am now idling the power, and I'm going to make a step 2 brake application just after the point you can see just coming up now. So just after this crossover, as we reach the 95 board, I've now made a step 2 brake application. In fact, we're not slowing down quite quick enough. I wasn't quite quick enough putting it into step 2. So I momentarily made a step 3 brake application, and now I've reduced back down to step 2 again. Here at Shieldmuir, I'm aiming to stop at the end of the platform. Departing from Shieldmuir, the starting speed limit is 95 miles per hour, and that's quickly going down to 30 miles per hour as we turn off the West Coast main line. As you see, the feather indicator above the signal is indicating that we are turning left. And we've got just under 1.5 miles to go to the next stop, which is Wishaw. I have temporarily cut the power as I felt we were just gaining a little bit too much speed there. And as you can see, the speed limit is now going up to 35 miles per hour. So I'm currently in step 2 of power here. And I'm just briefly going to increase to step 3 to help us accelerate slightly. And then back down to step 2 when we're doing about 32 miles per hour. So I've now gone back down to step 2 of power. One thing I forgot to mention when departing Shieldmuir is that you actually depart on a 1 in 100 uphill gradient, so you do need to apply power before the brakes are completely released. At this point we're now going along and we're about to be climbing as steep as 1 in 38, so we're going up a very steep uphill section. And in fact I do need to increase the power slightly to step 3, as we are going to lose a little bit too much speed. I've now gone back down to step 2 once again. The limit is going down to 30 miles per hour shortly after this signal, so I'm now going to reduce the power to allow the train to coast down towards 30. You can see the 30 speed board just coming up now. I have now gone back up to step 2 of power momentarily as I felt we were losing a little bit too much speed, and now back down to step 1. Just after we've crossed the junction here, the speed limit will be going up to 55 miles per hour. I have now increased the power to accelerate as the speed limit has gone up. However, there's not much point in accelerating much further than around 35 miles per hour, so I have now idled the power at 35. I'm going to brake to try and enter the platform at no faster than 25 miles per hour. You can see as we enter the platform, the speed limit is going up to 75 miles per hour. And I'm going to aim to stop just before the bridge here. Departing from Wishaw, the starting speed limit is 75 miles per hour, and we are starting on a 1 in 108 uphill gradient, so once again I applied 2 steps of power before the brakes were fully released, just to ensure that we didn't roll back. And at this point we've got around 4.5 miles to go to the next stop, which is Carluke. You can see coming up just ahead a flashing double yellow approach controlled signal. This indicates that we will be rejoining the West Coast main line. At this flashing double yellow signal we've got about a mile to go to the next signal. So we're still a fair way off the junction where we rejoin the West Coast main line at this point. I'm going to continue to accelerate towards the next signal, and if we haven't reached 75 miles per hour by that point I'm going to idle the power, as after that the speed limit will soon be dropping to 60 and then 40 miles per hour. You can now see the flashing single yellow signal just coming up, so at this point I'm now going to idle the power and allow the train to coast. I'm going to brake into step 1 for the 60 speed limit just after this Morpeth board here. So I've now braked step 1 and we should see the 60 board coming up very shortly. I've now released the brakes to allow the train to coast. After the 60 mile per hour speed limit, the next speed limit is a drop down to 40 miles per hour, and for that as a braking point I'm going to use the neutral section which is just coming up. So I have now made a step 2 brake application to bring our speed off. In fact, it looks like I need to go up to step 3 as it's not coming off quite quick enough. And now we're down to the 40 mile per hour speed limit. I am going to allow the train to coast and drive with caution, as we did have a single yellow signal there before we turn onto the West Coast main line. So I just want to ensure that the next signal is clear, which is why I'm driving with caution. If you look ahead now, you can see that there is a red signal on the left with a green signal on the right, which indicates that we have a red for this track. And in fact, we will probably need to stop at this red signal to wait for an express train to pass on the up line. And once that's passed, we should then be cleared onto the West Coast main line. So I have brought our speed off a little bit early so then I can gradually coast just towards the signal. The express train's now overtaken us, so we should very shortly be cleared onto the main line as the signal sections aren't that long, and at this point he's going at quite a speed, so he should clear the next signal section fairly quickly. As you can see, the signal has now cleared without me having to actually fully stop due to braking slightly early, and you do have to remember that the speed limit here is 40 miles per hour. The limit will be going up to 90 miles per hour just after we've joined the West Coast main line. As you can see, the next signal is clear, so we don't have to stop. And in fact, it's just cleared to a double yellow signal now, so the next 2 signal sections are cleared. And if this signal is displaying a double yellow aspect, that means we are cleared into Carluke platform. The speed limit's just gone up to 95 miles per hour, and at this point we've got around 1¼ miles to go to Carluke. As we now pass this next signal, I'm idling the power to allow the train to coast. We are going uphill slightly, which will help us to slow down a bit more. I'm going to brake just as we reach the signal gantry you can see on the opposite track there on the right now. So we're now passing that, and I've got the brakes on now for Carluke, as we've got just under ½ mile at that point. You can now see the platform at Carluke station just coming up. I have just increased the braking momentarily just as I wanted to enter the platform below 30 miles per hour. And in fact, I'm going to increase the braking once again to ensure that we slow down properly. I'm aiming to stop next to the clock you can see just coming up here. Departing from Carluke, the starting speed limit is 95 miles per hour, and we've got just over 8¼ miles to go to the next and final stop, which is Lanark. Again, we just started on a 1 in 100 uphill gradient, so I had to apply power before the brakes were fully released, and use higher power than normal just to ensure that the train didn't roll back. So although the speed limit is 95 miles per hour, the maximum permitted speed of this train is 90 miles per hour, so I'm going to try and ensure that we don't break that. I would just like to take the opportunity at this point to remind you that you can find me on Facebook under PTG Rail, and you can find the link for that in the description of this video. Also, if you really do appreciate the work that I do, then you can support me on Patreon financially, and again the details of that will be in the description of this video. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank everyone who's subscribed to this channel so far. We reached 1,000 subscribers on the 1st of March, and as of today, the 31st of March, I'm at around 1,500 subscribers, so I've gained 500 within a month, which I think is pretty good. I'd also like to thank everyone who's taken the time to head over to Facebook and like the PTG Rail page, and also thank everyone who is supporting me on Patreon. I'm now up to 8 supporters on there, 8 patrons. We're pledging a total of $60 a month, which is around 30 to 35 pounds. So again, thank you very much for that. I know that some of you do have some awards which you can claim, so please do come to me on Facebook, or you can email ptgrail@gmail.com with any inquiries or any questions. I'd also like to remind you that I am still planning a question and answer freight video. And so far I've only had questions from one person, so if you do have any questions you would like me to answer in this video, then please do leave them in the comments here, or head over to Facebook and ask me on the PTG Rail Facebook page. I have just reduced the power as we have now reached 90 miles per hour, so I'm now in step 2. I'm just going to keep an eye on the speed and see what happens. Very shortly the speed limit is going up to 100 miles per hour. Again, that won't affect us as we can't go above 90. And now we have a flashing double yellow signal which indicates that we are turning off towards Lanark. I'm now going to idle the power. And as you can see, we are approaching the approach controlled single yellow signal. This is 1 mile from the signal just before the junction onto the Lanark branch. The speed limit will be dropping to 35 miles per hour as we head towards there. So it's 40 miles per hour as we cross the junction onto the down line, and then down to 35 as we turn onto the Lanark branch. So I'm going to brake in a moment just after this second bridge, after the last flashing yellow signal. I've now made a step 2 brake application, which should bring our speed off about right. As you just saw, we had an L above the single yellow signal, which indicates that we are turning towards the Lanark branch. You can just see the crossover just ahead, where we will temporarily cross onto the down line. So I just found the brakes between step 1 and step 2 there to ensure that we'd lost enough speed. The speed limit has now dropped to 40 miles per hour, and then in a moment it is dropping to 35, so I've just made 1 step brake application. And we're now doing 35 just as we enter the 35 zone. Shortly after we've rounded this curve, the speed limit will be going up to 60 miles per hour. At this point, while we're doing 35, I've just idled the power to allow the train to coast. You can now see the 60 mile per hour speed board just coming up, and we can accelerate around the second overhead wire gantry after the speed board. Now going to accelerate for the 60 speed limit, and we are about to start going uphill on a gradient of 1 in 93. At this repeater you can just hear the, sorry, I was distracted there by the lag, I do apologise for the pause there. So at this repeater we're now 2/3 of a mile from the next speed limit, which is a reduction down to 50 miles per hour. At this point I've now idled the power to allow the train to coast, and we are about to start going downhill on a gradient of 1 in 86. So I'm making a step 1 brake application just now, as you saw the yellow milepost just on the left, just before we start going downhill. And this should bring our speed off for the 50 mile per hour speed limit about right. We are now doing 50 miles per hour, and I'm going to allow the train to continue to coast. The 50 mile per hour speed board is 2/3 of a mile from the next speed limit, which is a drop to 15 miles per hour, and we will get a warning for that in a moment. Now that we've reached the warning for the 15 mile per hour speed limit, I've made a step 1 brake application, which I will increase to step 2 in a moment. So I've now gone up to step 2, and then I'll reduce back to step 1 if required, just to ensure that we don't slow down too quickly. In fact, it seems we're not slowing down quick enough because the 15 board is just coming up. So I've had to make a full service brake application, and that brought our speed down just about right. So we were slightly closer to the 15 limit there than I thought. Unfortunately, I don't get everything quite perfect, and I do make some mistakes. I certainly make a lot of mistakes when practicing for these videos before I actually record them. And sometimes when making these videos, you'll find that I make a mistake while driving that's just so bad that I have to jump back to the previous stop. So as we reach each stop, I actually save the game so that I don't have to jump back to the start of the scenario if I can help it. Here at Lanark you can see that actually only one platform is normally used, which is on this side. If you look at the track on the other side, it's actually very rusty, so most trains just come into this platform. I assume that some trains may still use the other platform, but on the timetable they pretty much all say this side. And so here we are, arrival at Lanark. Thank you very much for watching, and I really hope that you've enjoyed the video.